Come, look at this beautiful fabric. It suits you perfectly.
Madam, it is lovely. I will take this one.
The sun hung low over the crowded market, spreading a golden haze across rows of colorful stalls. The air was thick with the scent of roasted corn, fried plantains, and the earthy aroma of rain-soaked dust. Voices overlapped, vendors calling out prices, children laughing, radios playing old songs. Among the noise and movement walked Amma, a quiet woman in her late 20s. She wore a simple cotton dress, her hair pulled back neatly. She moved with calm purpose, but her eyes told another story. A quiet loneliness that lingered even when she smiled. Amma had recently returned to the city after her foster mother's funeral. The woman who raised her was gone, leaving behind a silence that followed Amma everywhere she went. She'd taken a job teaching literature at a local school, trying to build a routine, but nothing felt right. Everything around her, the city streets, the familiar faces, even her own reflection, felt like fragments of a life she didn't quite belong to. That afternoon, Amma wandered the old section of the market, the place where forgotten things ended up. She liked the peace there, fewer crowds, softer voices, and stories buried in dust. An elderly woman sat behind a wooden stall piled with antique trinkets, cracked mirrors, rusted keys, faded letters, and old photographs bundled in string. Her wrinkled hands moved slowly, but her eyes were sharp and knowing. Amma knelt beside the stall, her fingers brushing over the objects. She didn't know what she was looking for. Maybe just something that reminded her she was still connected to something real. Then her hand stopped. Among the pile of black and white photographs, one caught her eye. It was old. Edges curled, colors faded to sepia. The picture showed a little girl standing in front of a village compound. The child had big, curious eyes, full lips, and a small crescent-shaped birthmark just beneath her neck. Amma froze. That birthmark. It was identical to hers. She lifted the photo closer, her breath unsteady. The girl's smile, shy yet familiar, stirred something deep in her chest. She could almost feel the breeze from that long-ago day, the sound of distant drums, the smell of wet earth. But the photo looked decades old. Her hands trembled. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself. The old vendor looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You like that one?" she asked, voice rough but kind. Amma hesitated. Where did you get this?" The woman shrugged. "Came from an estate sale in a faraway village. A komi, I think they called it. The man who brought these things said they belonged to an old family who lost everything long ago." Amma felt her heart pound harder. "Do you know who this child is?" The woman shook her head slowly. "No, my dear. But sometimes pictures find the people who need to see them." Her words sank into Amma like rain seeping into dry soil. She stared at the photo again, at the eyes that looked exactly like hers. "I'll take it," Amma said quickly, handing the woman a few bills. The vendor smiled faintly, sliding the photo into a small brown envelope. As Amma turned to leave, the woman's gaze followed her. Soft, almost sorrowful. Amma walked through the market in a daze, the noise around her fading into a distant hum. She held the envelope close to her chest as if it might disappear. When she reached the end of the street, she paused. For a moment, she glanced back. The old woman was still watching her, silent, her eyes glimmering with something that felt like recognition. The afternoon light dimmed as clouds gathered overhead. The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint chill. Amma didn't know why, but her world suddenly felt heavier, as if a door had quietly opened behind her, one she didn't remember closing. She looked once more at the photograph inside the envelope and whispered, "Who are you?" But deep down, something whispered back, a voice she hadn't heard since childhood. You already know. That night, the city was quiet. The rain had come and gone, leaving a thin mist over the rooftops. Streetlights flickered weakly through the fog, and the steady hum of crickets filled the air. Inside her small apartment, Amma sat by her wooden table, the lamp casting a soft yellow glow across the room. The photograph lay in front of her, the same one she had found in the market earlier that day. She had stared at it for hours. The little girl's face felt both strange and familiar, like a dream she once had but could never fully remember. Every detail pulled her deeper. The crooked wooden fence behind the girl, the faint outline of a clay pot near her feet, and that smile, that innocent smile that felt like it belonged to another life. Amma traced the birthmark in the picture with her thumb, then slowly touched her own neck. The same shape, the same place. Her pulse quickened. Her mind began to race. Who took this picture? Why did it end up in a dusty stall in a market she just happened to visit? And how could this child look exactly like her, years before she was even born? She pushed back from the table and opened a wooden box on the shelf, the one her foster mother, Mama Grace, had left her. Inside were old documents, adoption papers, letters, a few faded photographs. She unfolded the adoption certificate, yellowed with time, the ink slightly smudged. It read, "Child found by roadside near River Kita. Approximate age, 3. No known relatives." Amma swallowed hard. The memory of Mama Grace's voice echoed in her mind. Gentle, reassuring, yet distant whenever the topic came up. You were a gift, Amma. That's all you need to know. At the time, those words felt comforting, but now they felt like a curtain, one that had hidden something important from her all her life. Amma sat back down, the photograph now beside her papers. She looked at both, one from the market, one from her past, and felt the world slowly blur around her. A storm began to form inside her chest. She remembered how, as a little girl, she often woke from dreams of water, dark, endless water. She could never explain them, and Mama Grace always told her to pray before bed. But now, the river on her adoption papers, the fear of drowning, the unknown beginning, it all started to connect. Her heart felt heavy with questions she didn't know how to ask. Amma stood and walked to the window. The rain had started again, light and steady. Drops tapped softly against the glass. Her reflection stared back at her. Tired eyes, trembling lips, and something else beneath the surface. A quiet pull toward something she didn't yet understand. Who was I before I was found? The thought repeated over and over like a drumbeat. She closed her eyes and saw Mama Grace's face. Kind, worn, and full of secrets. A memory flickered. Amma as a young girl, sitting beside Mama Grace on a quiet evening. "Why don't I look like you?" Amma had once asked, her small voice uncertain. Mama Grace smiled gently, but looked away. "Because love doesn't always look alike, my child." Back then, Amma believed it. Now, she wasn't so sure. The photograph on the table seemed to stare at her, urging her to act. She picked it up again, flipping it over for the first time. The back was nearly blank, except for faint handwriting at the bottom corner. The letters were faded, but she could still make them out. Ekome Village, 1996. Amma's breath caught in her throat. The name felt unfamiliar, yet it stirred something deep, like a bell ringing in a forgotten part of her memory. She sat in silence for a long time, the name echoing in her thoughts. Then, almost without realizing it, she whispered, Ekome Village. Her decision formed quietly but firmly inside her. She couldn't ignore this anymore. She had spent her whole life teaching her students about truth and history, about how the past shapes who we become. Now, it was time to face her own. Amma folded the photo carefully, and slipped it into her journal. As she turned off the lamp and lay in bed, the rain grew heavier, drumming softly against the roof. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, it brought with it a dream of a river flowing endlessly under a gray sky, and a woman's voice calling a name that didn't sound like Amma. It sounded like Efua. Amma woke with a start, breath shallow, heart pounding. She sat up, staring into the darkness. The air felt charged, as if the world itself was waiting for her next move. And in that stillness, she whispered to herself, half in fear, half in resolve, "Tomorrow, I'll find out who I really am." The next morning broke quietly, with soft sunlight streaming through Amma's curtains. The city was still waking. Distant horns, children's laughter, the smell of fried dough rising from the street below. Amma sat at her table, a half-packed bag beside her. The photograph lay on top of her journal, along with a small bottle of water and a bus ticket that read, "To Ecom." Her hands shook slightly as she zipped the bag. She'd never been to Ekome, never even heard of it before last night. But something inside her, that deep, aching part that refused to sleep, told her she had to go. Before leaving, she glanced once more at Mama Grace's framed picture on the wall. "If you knew," Amma whispered softly, "why didn't you tell me?" The photo of her foster mother smiled back in silence. Amma sighed, grabbed her bag, and stepped out into the morning light. The journey took hours. The road wound through rolling green hills and dense forests, the smell of wet earth filling the air after a light rain. The bus rattled and groaned as it moved along the uneven path, carrying passengers who chatted in quiet tones or dozed off with heads against the window. Amma sat by the window, clutching the photograph like a fragile secret. Every turn of the road seemed to pull her closer to something she wasn't ready for, yet couldn't avoid. At one point, the bus slowed to pick up a passenger by the roadside, a young man carrying a basket of fruit and a small backpack. He smiled politely at Amma as he took the empty seat beside her. "Headed far?" he asked after a moment. His tone was warm, friendly. Amma hesitated. "Ekomi," she replied quietly. The man raised his eyebrows slightly. "Ekomi village? That's where I'm from." Amma turned to look at him, her surprise clear. "You're from there?" He nodded. "Born and raised. But I've been in the city for work. Going back now to visit my mother." He extended his hand with a grin. "Name's Kojo." Amma shook his hand, managing a small smile. "Amma," Kojo studied her for a moment. "You don't look like someone who visits Ekomi for fun," he said, half joking. Amma looked out the window. "I'm looking for something." He nodded slowly, sensing there was more behind her words. "Then maybe Ekomi's the right place," he said quietly. "That village has a way of keeping stories buried, until someone's ready to uncover them." Amma turned to him, startled by his words. "What do you mean?" Kojo simply shrugged. "You'll see." Arrival by the time the bus rolled into Ekome, the sky had turned soft and orange. The air felt heavier here, quieter, older. The houses were made of mud brick and wood, their roofs rusted from years of rain. Red dust clung to everything, even the air. As Amma stepped off the bus, the scent of smoke and cassava filled her lungs. Children ran barefoot through narrow paths, their laughter echoing off the walls. But as she walked deeper into the village, conversations hushed. Eyes followed her, curious, uncertain. Women carrying water paused to stare. Old men sitting under mango trees stopped mid-conversation. Amma clutched her bag tighter. A strange sense of familiarity washed over her, though she couldn't explain why. The path, the hills, the faint sound of a river nearby. All of it stirred something deep in her memory. Kojo walked beside her, noticing her unease. "Don't mind them," he said softly. "They're just not used to seeing strangers, especially ones who look familiar." Before Amma could ask what he meant, A small child ran past her, chasing a rolling ball. He stopped suddenly, staring at her wide-eyed. Then, in a small, trembling voice, he said, "Efua?" Amma froze. The child's mother rushed over, scooping him up quickly. "Hush, Kofi! Don't say that," she whispered, glancing nervously at Amma before hurrying away. Amma stood rooted to the spot, her pulse racing. "What did he call me?" she whispered. Kojo frowned slightly, watching the mother disappear around the corner. "Efua," he said slowly. "It's just a name. Don't worry about it." But Amma couldn't move. That name, it echoed through her mind like a forgotten song she once knew. The wind picked up, rustling the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat began, slow, steady, ancient. Amma looked down at the photograph in her hand. The same village compound, the same earth beneath her feet. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I've been here before. I just don't remember when." The drumbeat faded with the setting sun. Ekome had grown still, its narrow paths swallowed by dusk. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the hum of evening insects filled the air. Amma followed Kojo down a winding dirt road that led toward the heart of the village. She tried to ignore the glances from doorways and the whispers that followed her. Everywhere she looked, people seemed to recognize something in her face, something she didn't understand. Kojo finally stopped in front of a small compound surrounded by overgrown hibiscus bushes. "You should rest here for the night," he said gently. "It's my aunt's home. She knows everyone and everything in Ekome." Before Amma could respond, the wooden door creaked open. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, wrapped in a faded kente cloth. Her skin was lined with years, her eyes sharp and knowing. She studied Amma for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Kojo," she said softly, "you've brought her back." Amma felt the air leave her lungs. Kojo frowned. "Auntie Adisa, what do you mean, back?" The woman's gaze never left Amma. "Come inside, both of you," she said simply. The house of memories. The house smelled of palm oil and old wood. Clay pots lined the walls, and faded photographs sat on a shelf. Faces of generations long gone. A single kerosene lamp cast a warm glow across the room. Amma sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Kojo poured water into a bowl, trying to lighten the heavy silence. Adisa finally sat opposite Amma, her hands resting on a carved walking stick. "You shouldn't have come," she said at last. Amma swallowed hard. "I didn't plan to, I just found this." She slid the photograph across the table. Adisa's fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. Her eyes softened as she looked at it, then back at Amma. "So it has found its way home again," she murmured. Amma leaned forward. "Please tell me, who are these people? And why is my face in that picture?" Adisa was silent for a long time, her eyes distant. Then she sighed. "You ask questions that were buried many years ago, but perhaps it's time they rose again." She looked up, her gaze sharp now. "The girl in that photograph, her name was Efua." Amma's heart skipped. "That name? Someone called me that today." Adisa nodded slowly. "I'm not surprised. You bear her face, her spirit." Amma shook her head. "That's impossible. My name is Amma. I grew up in Accra. My mother, Mama Grace, she adopted me when I was a baby. I never knew anything before that." Adisa's expression softened. "And what did she tell you about where you came from?" Amma hesitated. "She said I was left at the hospital. No one came for me." Adisa's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not the whole truth." "The story. She buried outside." Thunder rumbled in the distance. The night wind blew through the open window, fluttering the lamp flame. Adisa leaned closer, her voice low. "Efua was born here, in Ekome. Her mother, Abena, was a kind woman, too kind for her own good. Her husband died young, and she raised Afua alone. But when Afua was 6, strange things began to happen. Amma listened, frozen. Rain would fall only over their compound, Adisa continued. The animals grew restless when she played. And one day, when she cried, the whole village flooded. People said she was touched or cursed. Kojo shifted uncomfortably. Auntie, you can't mean… Adisa held up a hand. The elders demanded the child be taken away. They said she carried a spirit too powerful for a mortal child. Abina refused, but the fear in the village grew. Her eyes glistened. One night there was a fire. The house burned, and both mother and child disappeared. We searched for days, but they were gone. Amma stared, her pulse pounding in her ears. And you think I'm that child? Adisa studied her face, her eyes filled with sorrow. I don't think, Amma, I know. Amma's voice broke. But how? That was over 20 years ago. How could I survive that? Why don't I remember? Adisa sighed. Because someone took you away. Someone who wanted to keep you safe? She looked at the photograph again. That picture was taken the day before the fire. Abina wanted a memory, a promise that her daughter's story wouldn't vanish. Amma felt tears welling up. Mama Grace, she whispered. She must have known, Adisa nodded. Perhaps she did. Perhaps she was the one who saved you. But the spirit that burned your home, it never left Ekome. The villagers say it still lingers here, waiting. The wind howled outside, rattling the door. Amma looked at Adisa, her voice trembling. Waiting for what? Adisa's eyes met hers, dark and solemn. For you to remember who you are and what you left behind. That night, Amma couldn't sleep. The rain had begun to fall softly outside, tapping against the clay roof like a whisper from the past. She lay on the small cot Adisa had given her, eyes wide open, heart unsteady. Every time she closed her eyes, flashes came. Smoke. Screaming. A woman's hand reaching through fire. She sat up abruptly, gasping. The kerosene lamp flickered, its flame bending as if to the rhythm of her breath. In the faint light, she saw movement, a shadow at the far corner of the room. Adisa? She whispered. No answer. Amma rose slowly, her feet cold against the earthen floor. The shadow trembled, then began to form, taking on shape, outline. The faint suggestion of a little girl standing still, facing the wall. Amma's voice quivered. Who are you? The girl turned. Her eyes glowed faintly in the lamplight, her face eerily familiar. It was like looking into a reflection from long ago, younger, untouched, but unmistakably her own. Amma stumbled back, the lamp shaking in her hand. You shouldn't have come back, the girl said, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. They remember. The land remembers. Before Amma could speak, the lamp sputtered and went out. The haunting, the room plunged into darkness. Rain beat harder on the roof, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and smoke. Amma's pulse roared in her ears. Then came the sound, a soft, rhythmic drumming outside, steady and low. She rushed to the window. Through the rain, figures moved in the mist, silhouettes circling something at the center of the village square. The drumbeat grew louder, faster, almost frantic. Amma turned to wake Adisa, but the older woman was already at the door, her face grave. Stay inside, she warned. What's happening? Amma demanded. Adisa didn't answer at first. She tightened her shawl around her shoulders. The ancestors are restless tonight. The spirits know you've returned. Amma felt her stomach twist. But why? I didn't do anything. You lived, Adisa interrupted softly. That's enough. She stepped outside into the storm, leaving Amma trembling by the window. The vision moments later, Amma felt drawn, pulled by something she couldn't name. Against every instinct, she opened the door and followed the sound of the drums. The village square was alive with firelight. Men and women moved in circles around a carved wooden effigy, their faces painted in streaks of white clay. They chanted words she couldn't understand, words that sounded ancient, carried through generations. When Amma appeared at the edge of the gathering, the drums faltered, heads turned, the chant died. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "It's her! Efua has returned." Amma shook her head. "No, I'm not." A gust of wind cut her words short. The fire surged high, its flames turning blue. The effigy cracked. A loud wail filled the air, the sound of something breaking free. The villagers scattered in terror. Amma fell to her knees as images flooded her mind. A house on fire, a child crying, a mother's arms shielding her, a voice saying, "Run, Efua! Don't look back!" She screamed, clutching her head. When she opened her eyes, the fire was gone. The square was empty. Only the rain remained, and the faint echo of a lullaby she couldn't remember learning. The confrontation Adisa found her there moments later, soaked and shaking. She knelt beside her, holding her close. "It's begun," Adisa said softly. "The spirit knows you're here." Amma looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "What spirit? What do they want from me?" Adisa's eyes were heavy with sorrow. "It's the spirit of your mother, Abena. Her soul never crossed over. She stayed, bound to the fire that took her." Amma's lips trembled. "Because of me?" Adisa nodded slowly. "She tried to save you, but when the flames came, the villagers said the child's power called them. They blamed her for everything. So Abena's spirit stayed behind, trapped by guilt, by grief, by love that could not let go." Amma covered her face. "I don't want this. I just wanted to know who I was." Adisa placed a hand on her shoulder. "To know who you are, you must face what you were. The past doesn't fade, Amma. It waits." Thunder cracked overhead. Amma turned toward the old path that led out of the village, the same one from her visions. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then I'll find her. I'll find what she wanted me to see." Adisa's gaze followed her. "Be careful," she warned. "The dead speak in riddles, but the truth will burn brighter than the fire that took her." Morning came shrouded in gray mist. The air hung thick with the smell of wet earth and smoke from dying embers. The village seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath after the night's haunting. Amma stood outside Adisa's house, her clothes still damp, her mind restless. Every time she blinked, she saw it. The blue fire, the faces in the smoke, and the voice that called her name through the rain. She knew she couldn't leave now. Not until she understood what had happened in this place. The search for answers Kojo found her by the old tree near the market square. His usual cheerful face was tight with worry. "I heard what happened last night," he said quietly. "The drums, the fire. People say you brought it." Amma turned to him sharply. "Do you believe that?" He hesitated, lowering his gaze. "I believe the land remembers. And it remembers pain." Amma clutched the photograph in her hand. The little girl with her eyes. "Then I need to see where it began," she said. "The house that burned," Kojo nodded slowly. "It's at the edge of the forest. No one goes there anymore." They walked together along a narrow dirt path, the wind whispering through tall grass. As they went deeper, Amma began to feel it. The faint hum in the air, like the land itself was murmuring beneath her feet. The ruins appeared suddenly. Blackened stones half buried in moss, outlines of walls that once held life. A single clay pot lay cracked by the doorway, filled with rainwater. Amma's throat tightened. "This is it?" Kojo nodded. "The storm came from the river that night. It swallowed the village, and the fire finished what the water didn't." Amma stepped inside what remained of the house. The air shifted, colder, heavier, echoes of the fire. Her fingers brushed the charred wall, and in that instant, the world blurred. The smell of smoke filled her lungs. The wind roared in her ears. Flames leapt up around her, painting the world red and gold. She was no longer in ruins. She was inside the fire. A woman's scream pierced the air. Through the smoke, she saw her mother, Abena, her face streaked with tears, her hands reaching for a small child hiding beneath the table. "Efua, run!" The child hesitated, crying, terrified. Then came another sound. Villagers shouting, accusing. "She brought the storm! The cursed one!" Abena's voice broke. "She's just a child." Amma felt her heart crack. The flames twisted, swallowing everything. She saw her mother fall, the roof collapsing, the child's scream fading into silence. When Amma gasped and stumbled back to the present, she was on her knees, the photograph pressed to her chest. Kojo rushed forward. "Amma, what happened?" Tears streamed down her face. "She didn't die in the fire," she whispered. "She died trying to protect me." The elder's truth later. That afternoon, Amma returned to the village square. The old elder, Kwaku, sat under the baobab tree, watching her with knowing eyes. "You went to the ruins," he said quietly. "You saw her," Amma nodded. "You knew all along." He sighed deeply, the wrinkles on his face deepening. "We all did. Abena was no witch. The people feared what they couldn't explain. The storm, the child who survived it. When the river rose that night, they said it was a curse, not nature." He looked away, shame heavy in his voice. "They turned on her, and when she tried to save you, the fire took them both. Or so we thought." Amma swallowed hard. "The spirit that haunts this place. It's her, isn't it?" Kwaku nodded slowly. "Her love was stronger than death. But love tied to pain becomes a chain. Until it's broken, she will never rest." Amma's resolve night approached again. The sky bled orange, then deepened to violet. Amma stood before the ruins once more, the photograph trembling in her hands. The wind whispered through the trees. Her mother's voice, gentle, sorrowful. Amma closed her eyes. "I remember now," she said softly. "You tried to save me. You stayed to protect me. But it's time to let go." The air grew warm, and from the ashes rose faint light, soft, golden, like the glow of dawn. A figure took form, Abena, her eyes full of love and grief. "My child," the spirit whispered, "you are free, and so am I." The wind stilled. The forest went quiet. Amma stood there, tears streaming, as the spirit faded like mist in sunlight. For the first time, the ruins felt peaceful. Ending Beat Kojo watched from a distance, awe written across his face. When Amma turned toward him, she smiled faintly. "She's gone," she said. "Finally gone," Kojo nodded. "Then maybe the village can heal too." Amma looked once more at the photograph before tucking it into her bag. "Not gone," she murmured. "Just home." Thunder rumbled far away. Not in anger this time, but as if the sky itself had sighed in relief. The morning after the fire's vision was quiet, almost too quiet. The mist clung to the trees like memory, heavy and silver in the dawn light. Amma stood at the edge of the path that led to the river, the photograph pressed against her chest. It had been weeks since she'd found it, that strange image that had shattered her life, and rebuilt it piece by piece. Now, it was all leading here. Adisa's voice echoed in her mind. "The truth will burn brighter than the fire that took her." Amma took a deep breath and began walking. The path of return. The path wound through the forest like a vein of red clay. The trees whispered overhead, their leaves dripping with the memory of last night's rain. As she walked, fragments of her childhood returned. Laughter by the riverbank, her mother's voice singing softly, her father's strong hands lifting her to see the clouds. And then the storm, the thunder, the river's roar swallowing everything she loved. Her steps slowed as the trees opened up to a clearing. Before her, the river stretched wide and gleaming under the morning sun, calm, deceptively gentle. This was the place where her life had ended once and begun again. Amma fell to her knees, staring at the water. The memory unfolds for a long time. She said nothing. Then she took the photograph from her bag, the one that had started it all. The edges were worn now, the ink slightly faded from her touch. She looked at the little girl in the picture, the child who didn't know she'd survive storms and loss, who didn't know she'd forget her name only to find it again. Tears slid down Amma's cheeks. Efua, she whispered, saying her birth name for the first time. It felt like reclaiming something sacred. The river's surface shimmered. A soft wind stirred, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw them. Her mother and father, standing at the far bank, smiling through the mist. Not ghosts, not spirits, just peace. The act of letting go Amma rose slowly. She held the photograph over the water, her fingers trembling. "This is where it ends," she said quietly, "and where it begins again." She loosened her grip. The photograph drifted down, landing gently on the water's surface. The current caught it, carrying it away, turning, gliding, until it disappeared around the bend. Amma closed her eyes. The weight she'd carried, years of confusion, guilt, and longing, began to lift. The air felt lighter. The river seemed to breathe with her, washing away the pain, leaving only memory. Soft, warm, alive. The healing moment. She sat there for a long time, watching the sunlight dance on the water. Birds called in the distance. The world felt reborn. The same, yet somehow changed. Amma whispered softly, as if speaking to her mother. "You were never gone. You were always in the river, in the fire, in me." A single tear slid down her cheek. But this time, it wasn't from sorrow. She smiled faintly and looked toward the horizon, where the water met the sky. Sometimes, she thought, we lose ourselves so we can be found again. Ending beat. When she finally turned back toward the village, the wind followed, gentle, warm, carrying the faint scent of smoke and lilies. The land was quiet, peaceful, as if it too had taken a deep breath. Amma walked slowly down the path, her heart steady for the first time in years. She didn't need the photograph anymore. She carried the story within her. Every scar, every flame, every drop of rain. And as the sun broke through the clouds, painting the river gold, Amma whispered one last time, "Goodbye, Efua." The sun was setting when Amma returned to Ikome village. The air was soft with the smell of cooking fires and ripe fruit. For the first time since she arrived, the village didn't feel heavy or haunted. It felt alive, as if the land itself had exhaled. Children ran through the narrow paths laughing. Women washed cassava by the wells, their voices humming familiar songs. Amma watched them from a distance, smiling faintly. Everything was the same. Yet everything was different, because now she understood. She had come here a stranger, chasing a photograph. But she was leaving as a daughter, reborn from truth, pain, and forgiveness. The visit. That evening, she walked up the hill to the small house where Madame Abena lived. The old woman sat outside, weaving a mat by the doorway, her fingers trembling slightly with age. When she saw Amma, her hands froze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world seemed to go still. Just the sound of the wind whispering between them. Amma stepped closer. "Mother," she said softly. The word hung in the air, fragile, uncertain, but real. Abina's lips parted. Her eyes filled with tears that glimmered in the fading light. "My child," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You came back." Amma knelt beside her, taking her mother's hands into hers, weathered, warm, trembling with memory. For a long moment, they just held each other. No words, no explanations, only the heartbeat of two souls that had been searching for too long. The father's return a few days later. Kojo brought word that Elder Kwesi, Amma's father, had returned from the outskirts where he'd lived in solitude. Amma hesitated before visiting him. The memory of fire and guilt still hung between them like smoke that refused to clear. When she entered his small hut, the old man looked up slowly. His eyes, though dimmed by years, lit up with something between disbelief and hope. He tried to stand, but his body shook. "Amma," he whispered. "Or should I say Afua?" She moved closer. "Amma is who I became. Afua is who I was. Both are me." Kwesi's lips trembled. "I should have never stopped searching. I thought God punished me for my sins." Amma's eyes softened. Maybe he was just waiting for us to forgive ourselves. He lowered his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said. Amma placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not something you earn, Father. It's something we give, so the past can finally rest." For the first time in decades, the old man smiled through his tears. A new photograph weeks passed. The village slowly healed. The people who once whispered now greeted Amma with kindness. She returned to her classroom in the city, her spirit lighter, her purpose renewed. One morning, sunlight streamed through her small home. On her desk sat a new framed photograph. Amma, Abena, and Kwesi, sitting together under the baobab tree. Their smiles were soft, but real, not perfect, but honest. Beside it, she placed the old black and white photograph of the little girl she had once been. Two photos, two lives. One story, her students often asked about the pictures. Amma would smile and say, "They remind me that sometimes history isn't something we read. It's something we remember." Closing scene that evening, she stood by her classroom window as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky blazed orange and gold, the same colors as the fire that once destroyed everything, now painting the world with warmth instead. She whispered softly, "Sometimes the past doesn't haunt us. It simply waits for us to come home." The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying her words toward the river miles away. Amma smiled, not as the lost girl named Afua, but as the woman who had finally found her way back.